guys, it's Emma, and I'm back today for you with another video. And today I'm going to be recommending some scary, creepy, freaky, disturbing books, just books that you get chills from, or at least that I got chills from. I have been very slowly edging my way into the horror genre. I'm very particular with my horror, but these books are the best that I have read. And I am going to be talking about them today and hopefully recommending them to you guys. And any ASMRs and ambiance videos that I happen to listen to while I was reading them, I will put them down below with the books. So, with that being said, let's get right into the first one. The first book that I want to recommend to you guys is Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice. Interview with a Vampire is about this vampire named Louis, and he is basically talking to this reporter about his whole life as a vampire, what he's experienced, how he feels about it. I gave it 4 stars. This book is truly gothic horror. It's so dark and just eerie. If you're like me and you have this thing where I call it silhouette phobia, it's where, you're afraid of silhouettes because, you can't see their face, so you don't know if they're looking at you. Yeah, it dabbles in that, and that freaked me out. So if you like gothic, truly gothic vampires, I wholeheartedly recommend Interview with a Vampire. Second book that I have for you guys today is The Wolfen by Whitley Strieber. Listen, this is my favorite horror book of all time. The Wolfen is about these 2 detectives, and they have to investigate these really grisly murders, and in doing so, they find out that the perpetrators are not people, but in fact, the Wolfen. And because the Wolfen are so secretive and they try to keep to themselves a lot, they ultimately decide to hunt the detectives. So the whole thing of the hunter versus the hunted and who's who. I gave this 4 stars. Genuinely kept me up at night. Just the freakiness of the Wolfen themselves, because they are apex predators that live in the slums of New York City. Like, they live right under our nose, and they have not been discovered at all until now. And so just the efficiency of what makes them good predators freaks you out. If you like a good werewolf story that, isn't like a cliche romance, The Wolfen is for you. We don't talk about the movie. That is something we don't talk about in this household. The third book is honestly one of my favorite classics, and it's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This book is about a doctor named Dr. Jekyll who, to his friend, is seeming very odd and a little bit, aloof, and that's normally not like him. And then his friend sets out to, find out what's wrong with him, and it turns out that Dr. Jekyll is experimenting with some really bad stuff, and shenanigans ensue. I gave this book also 4 stars. The main creepy thing in here is just the extremes to which Dr. Jekyll sits and Dr. Hyde sits. If you enjoy famous, monster stories, definitely pick up Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This book I gave so much hype to in my mid-year book freakout tag, and it deserved every single ounce of it. And that book, ladies and gentlemen, is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This book is about 4 Native American friends who've all gone their separate ways, but are all tied to one trip that they went on when they were younger. And let's just say they didn't do some very good stuff on that trip, and then they thought that people would forget about it, and their past comes back to haunt them in a very terrifying and harrowing way. This book is a 5-star read to me. A 6-star, if that's even possible. I am in the middle of reading a Native American myths and legends book, and to see a book use a mythos so chaotic, so old and ancient, it's terrifying, because it's unstoppable. Because how are you supposed to defeat something that is thousands of years old? This book is creepy, but it's also really just plain freaky. Like, it's just so jarring with the the scares in this book. So yeah, if you are like me and you wanted to read The Ritual, don't. Read The Only Good Indians. It's a Native American The Ritual, but 10 times better. One of my favorite duologies ever is the Greyland duology by Pater O'Gillen, modern day Ireland, I guess, and it's basically been taken over by this race of malevolent fairies. And I believe like from ages 14 to 18, you are called into the land of these fairies. And in our time, you have 3 minutes and 14 seconds to not get caught by these fairies and return home emotionally scarred, but alive. Or if you do get caught by these fairies, let's just say either way, you don't go home the same. Creepy to the max. Just the amount of disturbing and twisted that is in these books. I gave the first book 5 stars and then the second book 4 stars. It's a double hitter, honestly. The brutality of the fairy world and the real world, because you've got 14-year-olds training to survive a 1 out of 25 odds. It's just the utter brutality of this duology is what sucks you in. And I know the genre that these books are in technically isn't horror, but it definitely has horrific tendencies. I'm gonna tell you that right now. The next book that I want to recommend to you guys is a graphic novel series, and that is Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. Look, this series is set in America in the 1980s, so you've got the Cold War, you've got the Doomsday Clock, and then you've also got the added factor of vigilantes and superheroes being illegal. I had the whole series in one book, so I gave it all like 3 stars as a whole. If you love dark superhero stories that it's like a rose-colored glasses off and you realize that superheroes are human too, and some superheroes have god complexes or ego or are egomaniacs or are sociopathic, this is a book for you. It's very disturbing because just with all the chaos from like, you know, the regular world, and then you've got the fact that superheroes aren't always the good guys, it's just disturbing all around. So if you like dark superhero stories like The Boys, then I guarantee you'll like Watchmen. Next book that I have for you guys is Project Cain by Jeffrey Gerard. This was one of my favorite books last year that I read, and it's about this boy named Jeff. Jeff finds out that his dad was experimenting with the genes and DNA of infamous serial killers, and now teenagers whose genes have been taken from these serial killers and made into, I guess, a social experiment. These teens who are from serial killers are now on the loose, and Jeff and a CIA agent that he teams up with have to find them. There are some very creepy scenes in here. For example, there's kind of like a whole second person POV, which I know isn't everybody's cup of tea, but the fact that it was kind of like a like hunting people type of thing, it was very freaky. If serial killers fascinate you, if you like Criminal Minds or CSI, I guarantee you this book will enthrall you like it did me. Okay, this book, Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan DeFanu. This book is about a girl named Laura, and she and her father live in this castle in, I believe, Austria. One day they take in this girl who's sick, and they invite her to stay in their castle until she's well again and until her mother comes to pick her up. And this girl actually acts very strange and peculiar, and she acts very, very attached to Laura herself. And this girl is Carmilla. I gave Carmilla 3 stars. This story is a vampire story, and it predates Dracula by a good 25, 26 years. Listen, if you're like me and don't want to read Dracula plainly because of the word count, Carmilla is for you. Because one, I think it's gothic horror, it's vampires, lesbians. Joseph Sheridan literally said, y'all want vampires? Here, take a little splash of lesbianism. Bram Stoker could never honeycomb. If you like Dracula and you also like seductive vampires and gothic horror in itself, I really would wholeheartedly suggest to read Carmilla. The last book that I want to recommend to you guys is one that I'm reading currently, and that is House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. Listen, this book is frightening. I've made a promise to not read this at night because the one time I did, my lamp flickered. I haven't heard God speak that loudly in a while. That was a sign. It's hard to summarize House of Leaves without giving it away. All I'm gonna say is about this family who moves into this house on Ash Tree Lane, and their house is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. If you have a phobia of being alone in the dark, oh, this book is gonna freak you out, because I always say you're never afraid of being alone in the dark, you're afraid of not being alone in the dark. And this book definitely utilizes that phobia. So if you like being scared by that sort of thing, kind of like a creeping horror, House of Leaves, 10 out of 10 is for you. So I hope some of these recommendations interest you guys and you can have a more fun and spookier time in October. After I've finished House of Leaves, I'm gonna try and make a review for it, so look out for that. And another thing to look out for would be a comparison review type thing with The Only Good Indians. So I hope you guys have spooky ass October, and maybe this helped. Maybe this video will help in some sort of way. I really hope it does. And I also hope that you guys have a good rest of your day. Bye.